Alright everybody, welcome back! As most of y'all should be aware, I am a massive fan of the F-15 Eagle. It is my favorite plane of all time and one which I have been eagerly anticipating coming to the game. And because it's most likely coming this winter, in light of this I thought it'd be the perfect time to go ahead and talk about what to expect from the Eagle in War Thunder, its variants, and how they should perform in game. I will not be covering every F-15 variant, just the ones that we could reasonably expect into the game. With that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. The first variant of the Eagle, of course, is the F-15A. First flown in 1972, it wouldn't officially enter service until 1976, and this is what I had originally expected the Eagle to come to the game as. This is the lightest Eagle, being only around 800 kilograms heavier than the MiG-29 Empty. Overall, it should have similar flight performance in-game to the old MiG-29 flight model before the nerf, with better AOA and high-speed performance than the F-16, but worse low-speed handling. This variant of the Eagle initially didn't have access to the AIM-120 AMRAAM, having the AIM-9J, AIM-9L, and AIM-7F missiles listed in the manual. It has basically no capability for CAS. It would be able to carry dumb bombs, and in theory, it can carry laser-guided GBUs. The problem is it had no laser and so relied on buddy lasing, which doesn't exist in War Thunder, so it wouldn't have any laser guided bombs in the game. Now it would therefore be very much an RRB focused aircraft. Now, before y'all start talking about the F-15A not having flares, because I know some of y'all are typing right now, F-15A airframes did receive flares later on. They also always had provisions for countermeasures, they just weren't installed before this. The F-15A later in life did receive the MSIP upgrade that allowed for AMRAAM, the AIM-9M, flares, and upgrading the radar, along with other changes, basically making them F-15Cs minus the capability for CFTs. I have no information on when and how many it did, I just know they had to have the upgrade as there was F-15A MSIP aircraft in service in 2008 in the Oregon Air National Guard. I am unable to show the images due to copyright issues, but if you wish to do so, this book contains tons of info on the MSIP F-15As. As for where I think this aircraft will be, at this point, to be honest, I think it'll come as a premium with only Sparrows and just giving it MSIP flares. It seems like Gaijin's gonna skip the Sparrow F-15 meta and head straight to AMRAAMs, though I may be wrong. Small side note, the Israelis also used the F-15A and they called it Baz, which I am horribly mispronouncing. There shouldn't be any massive differences between the American and Israeli F-15As. The biggest thing is that they gained the ability to bring TV-guided GBUs like the GBU-8. They also use Navy Sidewinders like the AIM-9H instead of the AIM-9J, and they adopted the Python 3 to the F-15A early on as well. Their F-15As, just like the US, would later go on to be upgraded to be compatible with the AMRAAM and the Python 4 as well, though I would expect those to be reserved for the F-15C and the Israeli tech tree as well, just like with the US tree. The next variant is the F-15B. This is going to be rather short. It's just a twin-seater trainer version of the F-15A. It should have the same loads and similar performance to the F-15A, though a bit heavier due to the addition of a second seat and pilot. I would guess that if this was to come to War Thunder, it would do so as an event vehicle, as Gaijin seems to love adding two-seater versions of existing airframes as event vehicles. The next and most notable of the F-15 variants, at least for air-to-air, is the F-15C. This is the ultimate evolution of the single-seat F-15 variants, and actually only came a few years later than the F-15A, entering service in 1979. The F-15C seems to have also not had flares for its first period of service, with records of countermeasures being fitted as part of MSIP, and Eagle pilots talking about it needing to use speed brake chaff, and yes, they actually stuck chaff in the air brake, in both the A and C models of the Eagle. Regardless, it did gain countermeasures later, either 120 or 240 in the fuselage, and overall was very similar to the F-15A initially, being slightly heavier but having more fuel capacity and with provisions for CFTs if needed, though I don't expect the aircraft to come with them in War Thunder. They better not. This is the aircraft I would expect to come in December, and it will most likely come with AIM-9L, AIM-9M, AIM-7M, and AMRAAM, most likely the AIM-120A or B. It can carry up to 8 AMRAAM, with the wing launchers being dual use for both Sidewinder and AMRAAM, but I expect Gaijin will probably limit it to 2 or 4 AMRAAMs at first, increasing its load later. One nice thing about those dual launchers is they actually include a BLL pod like the F-14B, further increasing its countermeasures load. The F-15C will come after the F-4E in the US line, and it has the potential for either upgrades down the line or quote-unquote late versions of the F-15C coming later on, as this variant, unlike the F-15A, is still in service today. So it received HMD, it received ASA radar, the AIM-9X Block 1 and 2, and the AIM-120C and D later in life, so the F-15C will have plenty of room for growth moving forward. The Israelis, of course, also used the F-15C where it was known as the Akef. It is not called the Baz, that is a common misconception. Here is a list of Israeli F-15 names, and as you can see, the F-15C is called Akef, with a later F-15A and C variants being called Baz Meshupar. The Israeli F-15C, of course, can use the Python 3 or the AIM-9LRM, but would use the Python 4 and Python 5 later on. For now, I wouldn't expect either of these missiles to come to War Thunder when the F-15C comes, as both are extremely advanced and are much better than the current missiles in game. The Python 4 and Python 5 have the same body and are extremely agile, are able to re-engage targets after missing it, and have similar high off-board sight capability to the AIM-9X in the case of the Python 4 and the AIM-9X Block 2 in the case of the Python 5. With the Python 4 already having IRCCM similar to that of the Stinger, you can see the issue. The Akef will arrive with either the Python 3 or the AIM-9M, whichever Gaijin decides on, though I would probably expect the Python, as the Israelis didn't actually use the 9M, they just gave it to the Barak as a temporary thing since they had no better option. The Israelis also used AMRAAM on their F-15Cs in addition to the normal Sparrows, and later seems to have equipped the Derby missile family. The Derby is an extremely agile active radar missile based on the Python 4, and I don't think we'll be getting that right off the bat. I think they'll just stick to the AMRAAM A or B, just like the American counterpart. Another notable difference, just like with the Israeli F-15As, is that they will actually have some air-to-ground capability, with extra guided munitions added compared to the US, including the JDAM and Popeye, along with a few other options. The Akef will most likely come after the current S-2000 in the tech tree. The F-15J will most likely also come to the game at the same time, and is literally just an F-15C for Japan, with little if any changes, or at least that would matter in game. The F-15J and DJ are identical to the F-15C and D, aside from the ECM, radar warning system, and nuclear equipment, so literally the only thing that might matter in game is the RWR. F-15Js would also go on in real life to get the MSIP package just like the F-15C, and most likely will drop with the same missile kit as the F-15C, probably gaining the AAM-3 later, which is a missile performance in between the AIM-9M and the AIM-9X, so too advanced for now. The F-15J also has an upgrade path with the AN/APG-82V1 ASA radar coming soon, although they haven't actually put it on there yet as far as I can tell, and the AAM-4 and AAM-5 missiles ahead of it in the future, likely on a later F-15J. The F-15J will come after the F-4EJ Kai in the tech tree. The F-15D and DJ are just twin-seat versions of the F-15C/J, and just like with the F-15B, they have very similar performance and the same loadouts as the single-seat variants, just a little bit heavier. Just like with the F-15B, if they're going to come at all, I'd expect them to be some form of embed vehicle, possibly a premium down the line as well. The Israeli F-15D, Akef, of course, has air-to-ground munitions added like their F-15Cs, and I could see this being a strong candidate for an event vehicle, since it's both ground attack focused and a dual-seater, which we all know Gaijin loves. Next is the F-15E, known as the Strike Eagle and one of the most famous variants of the aircraft. First delivered in 1988, this is less likely to come anytime soon, most likely coming when Gaijin decides the US needs even more CAS options. That isn't to say the F-15E is incompetent for air-to-air by any means, it still has all the same air-to-air options as the F-15C and a very strong radar as well, with the AN/APG-70 to start and gaining ASA later, just like the F-15C did. I will say some late F-15Cs also received this AN/APG-70, but Gaijin most likely would stick to the AN/APG-63 series of radars for the F-15C line. That was what the majority of them had. The airframe was reinforced and is therefore heavier, but the F-15E also has stronger engines. With the CFTs off, the thrust-to-weight ratio isn't a drastic amount worse, but for the F-15E you're going to want to have these on, as the big thing for the F-15E is CAS, and the CFTs have hardpoints for ordnance. Speaking of, the F-15E will have some insanely nasty loadouts for CAS. giving access to the Lantern or Lightning Pod, of course, but along with that, a variety of dumb bombs, Mavericks, GBU 12, 15, 24, and 28 in its original configuration, and possibly stuff like the JDAM in the future, depending on how Gaijin decides to implement them. This will be the quintessential multi-role F-15, and to be honest, I'm unsure of where Gaijin will place it. My best guess is that they'll add more F-111 variants and then place the F-15E after the last F-111 variant, because it did replace it in real life, but they could also put it in the normal F-15 line as well. The Israelis, of course, also use the F-15E, and it's known as the Ra'am in Israel. I probably terribly pronounced that. This is another similar case of differing weapons and slightly different avionics. The Israeli F-15E would almost certainly drop with Python 4, as I do not expect the F-15E to come to the game anytime soon. Their F-15Is, as is known there, have a worse version of the APG-70 with 1/3 less resolution than the American version, although they do have an ASA radar upgrade path as well, just like the American F-15E. It's also set to receive new weapons, quote-unquote, though what those weapons are, I cannot actually seem to find out. Finally, the last version of the F-15 that we can ever expect to come to War Thunder is an extremely new one, the F-15EX. This version is kind of a blend between the F-15E and the F-15C with the stronger engines while including a lighter airframe. It has the strongest radar in any Eagle to date and the capability to carry up to 12 AMRAAM, or more likely AIM-260 by the time that it comes to War Thunder. There is very little information available on this jet as of now, just know that it's the penultimate F-15 and is so new that only 3 have been made so far. The US already has 3, Israel is buying some as well, and both these nations should receive it whenever it does come to War Thunder, although I wouldn't expect that to happen for quite some time. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this new style of content. I don't typically do this more informational thing. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you did enjoy it, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I will catch y'all next time. So, peace, y'all.